So finally, here's my 22-year ownership review of my Mgb Roadster 1968 chrome bumper, wire wheel, classic. And it is, so first to start off, it's a classic car, but it's the most common classic car that you'll ever see. And it was launched in 1962 with this modern, as they called it back then, monocoque design, where it didn't have a chassis that you could take the body off, much like a lot of like the MGA, for example. It's more spacious than the MGA, but somehow slightly shorter. Now, I'm not an expert on the MGA, I've never been in one, but I've had this one since 1998, and it's now 2020, and I got it as an import, as in it had returned from the US. And it was in a pretty poor state. It was basically no engine or gearbox, it was left-hand drive, and it was burgundy, and it'd been blue, and it'd been red, and but it had lots of stuff missing. So I decided to buy a similar age to British rusted to hell GT, a hardtop coupe, and I took everything out of that. I took a working engine and gearbox, I took the wiring, dashboard, steering rack, and I put it back together. Well, actually, I had to first take it somewhere to get all of the welding done. So all new floor pans, door skins, front wings, rear half wings, new bonnet, new front balance, new screen top bit, because it was a 3-wiper rubber dash model, which was rubbish. So the only thing original bodywork wise, they had new sills, new floors, Newcastle sections. So the only thing that this car has really original is the boot lid, which is misshapen because of the metal rod stand. Apparently it had 95 brake horsepower when it launched. Now that 95 horsepower comes in at 5,400 RPM. I don't think this car's ever hit 5,400 RPM. Now I'm going to rev it, and I've got a camera on the steering wheel that's going to capture it, but it's not going to get anywhere near that. Okay, that's about as far as it goes. Bearing in mind, this is a 52-year-old car. It's a bog standard engine, electronic ignition, and it has a new battery and a new coil that gives it a bit of zip. It hasn't been modified for the hardened seal, so it can take unleaded petrol, so I have to put an additive in. But that's not bad, is it? That went alright, and it's great fun. And originally it was supposed to do 0 to 60 in 11 seconds. I don't know if it's going to do that now, and I'm too scared to even try it. If I find a clear road with a 60 mile per hour speed limit, I'll give it a go. So I've had it for 22 years. So for the first 2 or 3 years, it was just I was renovating, and I sent it off. As I said, bodywork was done, all the new panels were welded in, it was sprayed and sent back to me, and then it was up to me to put it all back together. Now, one thing I'd recommend not doing, is trying to put the engine and gearbox in by yourself. So I did that. So basically I went and hired a engine hoist, and I put the gearbox and the engine together. I had no idea if either of them would work again. And then I put them in, but they have to come in at an angle. So the gearbox comes in, and it was hitting the floor. So what I did was I put a piece of rope through the hole for the gear stick. Ah, that bounced. And tied it to the end of the gearbox. So while I was pushing the engine hoist to get the engine into the car, I had to pull the rope to lift up the end of the gearbox so it wouldn't drag on the floor. It was horrific. I did my back in, I was laid up for weeks. I would never recommend that. I was a much younger man then as well, so now it would probably just kill me and cripple me. But it's so easy to work on. So when it finally got going, basically I didn't service the engine. The car hadn't been used for I think 20 years when I got the British one that had the engine and gearbox in. But I put it in, I put it all together, and I fired it up without changing the plugs, the condenser, or the points. I just basically flushed some oil through it, put some new oil in, put some coolant in, put some gearbox oil in, and fired it up. And guess what? It started up. And that's how basic these engines are. This one would have had the 5-bearing engine, so it's got synchromesh, so I don't need to double D-clutch to change up and down. But so in that time, once it started going, probably the first 10 years, I didn't enjoy driving it that much, because you'd get fuel evaporation. So as soon as it got up to temperature, it would stall everywhere I went. And then I got the tappets done, and I remember I started to enjoy it a bit more, because instead of just hearing the engine all the time, I could just hear the lovely exhaust note. And then the next game changer, just as I was thinking, I'm not enjoying it, there were some years where I just wouldn't even use it. So the next game changer was when I had the electronic ignition fitted. It's called Power Spark. I just bought it off eBay, fitted it myself. It replaces the condenser and the points. And what it does is, out of the tuning equation, it takes out a worn distributor, because the distributors will spin completely true, which means the gap for the points is perfect once you set it. But a worn distributor means that it's never constant. Whereas this, it's like almost like a magnetic thing that sits around the spindle in the distributor. So as soon as I put it in, it just revved so much more. Obviously the timing had to be adjusted to a certain amount of degrees, which I didn't know how to do. So I took it to the garage, had that done, had the correct spark plugs put in, because you have to put the right hardness of the spark plug in, and had it serviced, got the tappets done again, and it was transformed. Then the next stage was, what turned it up a notch again, was getting that coil fitted and a new battery. I don't know why the battery made such a difference, and also because I still use the fuel additive, when I put Shell V-Power Nitro Plus in, got a great name for a petrol, when I put that in, it completely transformed the performance. It just had more zip and pep, and it sounded amazing, and just went that little bit better. I've got oversized tires on, so it's geared wrong, but still, it still goes great, and it's great fun to drive. And the thing about it is, I don't get it serviced every year. I don't wash it, which you can't really tell, but it's covered in dust. And every single part for this car, I mean every single part, is still made. So you can still, if anything breaks, if anything needs servicing, you can still buy it, and you can buy it cheap. You buy it off the internet, you can buy it from a local supplier. Should I try I was going to try the 0 to 60, but let's have a look if I can get a bit of clear road. See, I might be able to try it here. Alright, here we go. For a 52-year-old car that's only got tiny little modern tech on it just to make it more reliable, it's just transformed. And when the weather's like this, it's like 25 degrees, it's gorgeous. So I'd highly recommend it. And yeah, the maintenance, as long as you keep getting the oil changed and the plugs done every few years, you don't even have to do it every year, and use it every year, then it'll be absolutely fine. You have to just get the garage to go around it with a grease gun to make sure the suspension's all okay. Now it's MOT and road tax exempt, but I'm not comfortable with never getting it MOT'd. I would rather a garage told me that something was about to fall off it, or it was about to explode, rather than it actually happening. And also, and because you can buy everything for it, the servicing is so cheap, and it's hardly cost me anything. The only thing it's cost me is because at the moment I get everything done from the garage because I haven't got time to do it myself, and all the space. And the thing that cost a significant amount of money was I had the clutch done, which is a significant undertaking. But still, I guess it's a similar amount to what it costs for a modern car. I think it cost £1,200 to get done at a garage, and nearly all of that was labour. But the problem is that, you know, some of them take just the gearbox out, but a lot of the garages will take the engine and gearbox out because it's a quicker job that way. So there's always a chance that a wire will break or something like that, and that's what happened to mine. A wire broke and it started stuttering, and it was a wire off the coil, and I didn't know it had broken. And when it started driving quite badly, I went round all the wiring and just was trying them, and it just snapped up in my hand. I changed it for another connector, and it's back to being brilliant again. So I would definitely do that. And actually, this is the first video with my rebranded channel, Flat Cap Driver. I should have said, welcome to Flat Cap Driver. Do I need the theme tunes? No. But, and even at these speeds, you can still put your foot down and you can feel it going. It's not like it's laboring and you can't really keep up with modern traffic. You can, but can you use it as a daily driver? It's not waterproof, it will rust away. But you could if you were just in the summer driving to work in the morning and it was a glorious day. I've done that. I've used it. I think I used it for 2 weeks where I drove to work every day in it, sat in traffic, and it gets up to a decent temperature, but it's got a new thermostat, and I kid you not, it took me 15 minutes, not 15 minutes, half an hour to change the thermostat. As long as you don't snap a bolt, you're okay. It sat right on top of the engine and it was really easy to do. Right, let's turn here and the indicator's on the wrong side of the stalk, which is actually fine because there isn't anything on the right side of the stalk. On the correct side of the stalk, which is the left hand side. But when you get back into your normal car, every now and again you'll turn the wipers on. And it's so easy to drive. The only thing is that's a bit different is the overdrive. So if I put it into overdrive, does it work? Yes, it does, which works in third and fourth, and it just means that an electronic overdrive, which is an electronic fifth gear, is engaged in the engine when this switch on the dashboard is flicked. Now, once you've got one, I wouldn't recommend restoring one unless you're really good with spanners, or if you just said, well, actually, I'm going to get one and put a brand new shell on it and slowly put things on. You can't go wrong. I didn't know anything about cars, and I just got a Haynes manual, and I relied on my dad giving me advice. And he was an old school mechanic, so he used to work at Jaguar cars in the 70s. So he would give me advice. Never actually got his hands dirty with it, but I mean, without his advice, I wouldn't have been able to do it. And it was a good way to connect with him as well, back in the day. And that's the thing. So once you get one and you've got it running as you want it, it'll just keep going. It'll fire up every year. Mine doesn't even, I wouldn't recommend doing this, but mine doesn't even have a trickle charger on every winter, over the winter. I park it up in probably, if I've got a good run out of it in the summer, I park it up in September or October. And then it doesn't get used until April, May, and it just fires up. With that brand new battery, with the previous battery, it fired up every year without the need for a charger or a trickle charger for 10 years. That's not bad going for a modern battery. 10 years, and it would sit for at least 6 months every winter without a trickle charger, and then it would fire up every spring or summer. So I would highly recommend, if you just want to get into classic cars and you just like something that's a little bit like retro, that's kind of nice to look at and is great fun to drive and has an amazing support network. The club has got the biggest classic car membership of any club in the world. Huge amounts of them were exported to the US. I think some 600,000 of them were made and sold. And by that I mean from 1962 to 1980, not including the Mgb RV8, which came much later. And You know, the brakes are fine. It's got disc brakes at the front, drum brakes at the back. Mine doesn't have a servo, but it's standard, so I wouldn't do anything to boost the performance, because it's just so much fun as it is, and it doesn't need the extra performance, because if it's running right, it's such great fun to drive, and it feels fast when it's actually not very fast. But if you drive it safely and you know what you've got, by that I mean, you know you've got to press the brake pedal hard to make it stop. And I think I'm about to hit another bump. Here we go. Oh! Now stuff like that. So it's a bit of a boat when it comes to handling, because it's got quite a lot of body roll. It's not really made for powering through corners. But on the country winding roads, as long as you're not driving like a maniac, it's so enjoyable. And I would suggest, if you wanted to get into classic cars and you wanted something simple that maybe you could do a bit of work on yourself, or take it to a local garage, any local garage, and they could work on it, it's the car to have. You'd need someone to set the carburetors up, to get it tuned right, get the tappets done. Those are the basic things. And then make sure, the things that you've just got to check is that there's the right oil in it, the right amount of oil in it. It's got the coolant's always topped up. There's gearbox oil in it, and the great thing is, behind the dash, there's a dipstick for the gearbox. I don't know why cars don't have this. Modern cars don't have this. So many of them, gearboxes get killed because there's no one knows how much oil's in the gearbox, and you don't know until it seizes or it makes a funny noise. And also check the oil in the rear axle, and that's it. Those are the basics, and the rest obviously is the same as, you know, a modern car. Check the tires. You might need, if it's spokes, you might need to get the wheels checked out every now and again, but you just need to find a trustworthy local garage that will service your car for you regularly. And by that, mine goes to the garage every couple of years, if that. And it's been like that for 22 years. There's been a few years where I've just not driven it, I've not got around to it, had a new baby or something like that. And guess what? It's just still fired up, because it's so basic. And unlike a modern car, you know, during lockdown where you left it and it died because the computer's maintaining so many settings, there's a clock, there's GPS, there's all sorts. Whereas this one doesn't even have a clock. Once you take the key out, it's not keeping anything alive. So which is why the battery doesn't die. And if it does die, there's something wrong with the wiring. But other than that, it's been amazing, and I would highly recommend it. And that's been my 22-year ownership review. And over those 22 years, I've had more fun than any other car. Admittedly, I've had great fun in my Porsche, but you know, it costs a lot of money to buy. It costs money to get it serviced, and it probably needs even more servicing than this. But this one, I mean, originally, all those years ago when I bought it, and I bought the rusted British one for the parts, prices aren't relevant now, but back then I bought it, the convertible one, the one that I'm driving, the Shell, for £800, but obviously it needed all of those panels, welding, spray work, all of that stuff. Where the British one, which was rusted to hell, cost me £300. Now you can't get them for that much these days, but you could buy a working one with hardly any rust for probably £6,500 now. The thing that you mustn't expect is that it's going to go up in price. The fact that there's so many of them still available, no. There's no scarcity or anything like that. If I put my foot down in fourth on a country lane, so things to look out for are, obviously, make sure it's completely rust free. That's the stuff that will make you put it away, never get around to it, and it'll just get worse and worse and worse until you end up throwing it away. If you buy one with no rust, everything else can be fixed. engines available brand new or second-hand. You can get them rebuilt quite easily, gearboxes, overdrives, all of that stuff, and it can build up. But if you buy one with all of it done, it's just amazing fun. And I thrash this car, and thrashing it means not going that fast, but it feels so fast, and you've got the wind in your flat cap, and it's amazing. So yeah, go and get one. No, don't go and get one. Only get one if that's, because it's not that interesting. It's not a particularly interesting car. It was marketed as a poor man's E-Type, which is what made me buy it. Because I wanted a E-Type, and I couldn't afford one. And I thought, I know, I'll just buy the poor man's E-Type. And I haven't regretted it, but it's not a particularly interesting car. That's just my opinion though. Others may disagree. But the thing about it is on a day like this, you would just enjoy driving it. It's fairly practical. There's space behind the seats, tons of leg room. I love the big steering wheel. There's ones that you can get with modified engines, stage 2 heads, whatever that means. I mean, you can even get them with the hardened seal, so you can put unleaded straight in, whereas I put the additive in. But I've done quite a lot of reading, and I thought about getting it done, but everybody says they never drive as well. I don't know why that is. Maybe they're not, there's something about the rebuild of the engine or changing the head isn't quite right, which is why those didn't work as well. But mine with the additive works absolutely fine. It's not great on miles per gallon, but that's probably because of the way that I drive it. If you drove it like this and you had the overdrive on, it'd probably be quite fuel efficient, but it's not going to be like anything like your modern car. But the way that I drive it, I go through petrol like anything, but I hardly ever drive it. When I do, I only drive it to go out and have some fun. Not I'm going from A to B and that's the sole reason for driving it. No, it's I'm going from A to B and I want to have fun while I'm doing that, which is great. So yeah, I'll be doing some more videos. I don't know if they'll be about the Mgb or my Porsche 996, but subscribe, give me your comments, tell me what you think. My ownership review has just been my non-technical, non-journalistic, non-car review version of events. and just been about my experience of owning and driving a 1968 Mgb Roadster chrome bumper wire wheel. And it's been a whole heap of fun.